Rosa Parks, The Quiet Power That Changed a Nation. December 1st, 1955. A seamstress finishes her work. She boards a bus. She takes a seat. And when commanded to give up that seat, she says one word that would echo through history. No. Not shouted. Not screamed. Spoken with the kind of quiet certainty that comes from a place deeper than anger, deeper than fear. This is not a story about rebellion. This is a story about something far more powerful. This is about a woman who understood that true strength doesn't announce itself. It simply refuses to move. Her name was Rosa Parks. And today, you're going to learn why the most dangerous person in any room is the one who has made peace with their own dignity. Rosa Louise Macaulay was born on February 4, 1913, in Tuskegee, Alabama. She grew up in a world that told her, every single day, that she was less than human. Signs on water fountains. Separate entrances. A system designed to break the spirit of people who looked like her. But here's what they didn't count on. Her grandfather slept with a shotgun by his bed, not out of aggression, but out of refusal to be terrorized. Her mother was a teacher who made sure Rosa could read before she was 6. She was raised by people who understood something critical. You cannot control what the world throws at you, but you can control whether it defines you. Rosa Parks was not an accidental hero. By the time she sat on that bus, she had already been working with the NAACP for over a decade. She had attended workshops on civil resistance. She had watched others try to challenge the system and fail. She knew exactly what would happen when she refused to stand. And she did it anyway. Not because she was fearless, but because she had spent years building something more valuable than fearlessness. She had built conviction. And conviction doesn't need courage. It simply acts according to what it knows is true. This is the woman you're about to study. Not a symbol. Not a myth. A human being who faced a choice we all face every single day. Will you compromise your dignity for comfort? Or will you sit in the fire and let it refine you? Let's begin. Lesson 1. Preparation happens in private. Impact happens in public. When Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, the world saw one moment. What they didn't see were the years that came before it. She had been secretary of the Montgomery NAACP chapter since 1943. She investigated cases of sexual assault against black women. She documented injustices that would never make the news. She attended the Highlander Folk School, where she trained in nonviolent resistance tactics. While everyone else was living their daily lives, Rosa Parks was sharpening herself into a tool that history would eventually need. Here's what this means for you. The person you are in private determines the person you become in public. You cannot rise to the occasion if you haven't built the foundation. You cannot stand firm under pressure if you haven't practiced standing firm when no one is watching. Every single day, you are either preparing for your moment or you're letting it slip away. The gym session you skip. The book you don't read. The difficult conversation you avoid. These aren't small things. These are the bricks you're choosing not to lay in your foundation. When your moment comes, and it will come, you won't rise to the occasion. You will fall to the level of your preparation. Pause. Reflect on this. What are you building in private? What version of yourself are you preparing to become? Lesson 2. Dignity is not negotiable. The bus driver, James Blake, told Rosa Parks to stand. The law said she had to stand. The weight of an entire social system demanded she stand. She remained seated, not out of spite, not out of anger. She remained seated because she had already decided, long before that day, that her dignity was not a bargaining chip. It was not something she would trade for safety or convenience or peace. This is the lesson most people never learn. They negotiate with their own self-respect. They give pieces of it away, thinking they can get it back later. They compromise their boundaries because confrontation feels uncomfortable. They tolerate disrespect because speaking up feels risky. But here's the truth. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you teach the world that's what you're worth. Rosa Parks understood that dignity is like virginity. Once you give it away, you can never truly reclaim it. You can rebuild your self-respect, yes, but something is forever changed. In your relationships, at your job, in your family, people will test your boundaries constantly. Not because they're evil, but because most people take whatever you allow them to take. They will push until they find resistance. Your job is to be immovable on what matters. Not aggressive. Not loud. Simply unmoved. When someone disrespects you, you don't have to shout. You don't have to argue. You simply establish the consequence and follow through. You become someone who cannot be moved on matters of principle. This is not about pride. This is about understanding that the moment you compromise your dignity, you compromise everything built upon it. Lesson 3. Fear is not a stop sign. Let me be clear about something. Rosa Parks was afraid. She knew what happened to people who challenged the system. She had seen the violence. She had documented the terror. She knew that saying no on that bus could cost her everything. And she said it anyway. This is what separates the mediocre from the memorable. Mediocre people wait until they're not afraid. Memorable people act while their hands are shaking. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters. It tells you that you're at the edge of your comfort zone. It tells you that growth is available on the other side of this moment. But fear is not a directive. It doesn't get to make your decisions for you. You want to start that business? You're going to be afraid. You want to leave that relationship that's slowly killing you? You're going to be terrified. You want to stand up to that person who's been walking over you. Your heart is going to pound in your chest. Do it anyway. Because here's what happens when you act despite fear. You teach yourself that fear is not fatal. You build evidence that you can survive discomfort. And slowly, over time, you become the kind of person who feels fear and simply acknowledges it like you would acknowledge rain. It's there. It's real. And you're moving forward anyway. Rosa Parks didn't stop being afraid. She just stopped letting fear make her decisions. Lesson 4. Silence is a choice, and sometimes it's the wrong one. For years before that bus ride, Rosa Parks had remained silent about countless injustices. She had followed the rules. She had kept her head down. And every day, the system that oppressed her grew stronger because people like her stayed quiet. Then one day, she made a different choice. Understand this. The world will always prefer your silence. Your silence is convenient. Your silence maintains the status quo. Your silence allows other people to remain comfortable in their ignorance or their cruelty. But your silence also makes you an accomplice to your own oppression. This applies to every area of your life. That toxic work environment where everyone complains in private, but no one speaks up in meetings. That relationship where you swallow your truth to keep the peace. That friendship where you pretend everything is fine while you're being slowly disrespected. Your silence is agreement. Your silence is permission. Your silence says, yes, this is acceptable to me. And maybe you think you're being wise. Maybe you think you're picking your battles. But there comes a point where silence becomes cowardice dressed in strategy. You don't have to fight every battle, but you have to fight the battles that matter. And the battles that matter are the ones that involve your core values, your dignity, and your truth. When Rosa Parks spoke that single word, no, she wasn't starting a fight. She was ending her participation in her own diminishment. What are you silent about that's slowly destroying you? What truth are you swallowing because speaking it feels too hard? Pause. Reflect on this. Lesson 5. Your character is built in the mundane, not the extraordinary. People look at Rosa Parks and see that one moment on the bus. They think heroism is a flash of inspiration. They think courage is something that arrives when you need it. But heroism is just consistency meeting opportunity. Rosa Parks was the same person on December 1st, 1955, that she was on November 30th and November 29th, and every day before that. She had been living with integrity when no one was watching. She had been standing firm on small things long before she was asked to stand firm on something historic. Your life works the same way. You don't suddenly become disciplined when the stakes are high. You don't suddenly develop integrity when everyone is watching. You simply become visible. The person you are at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday when you're alone and tired, that's who you really are. The choice you make when no one will ever know, that's your actual character. If you cut corners when it doesn't matter, you will cut corners when it does. If you compromise your values over small things, you will absolutely compromise them over big things. This is why the small things are actually the big things. The decision to get out of bed when your alarm goes off. The choice to keep your word even when it's inconvenient. The discipline to do what you said you would do even when you don't feel like it. These aren't minor choices. These are character-building moments. These are the reps that prepare you for the moment when the world is watching and everything is on the line. Rosa Parks wasn't tested on that bus. She was revealed. Everything she had built in private simply became public. What is being revealed about you in your private moments? Lesson 6. You cannot control the outcome. You can only control your response. When Rosa Parks refused to move, she didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know she would be arrested. She didn't know her action would spark a 381-day boycott. She didn't know her name would be remembered over half a century later. She just knew she couldn't participate in her own degradation anymore. This is the freedom that most people never find. They're so obsessed with controlling outcomes that they paralyze themselves into inaction. They need to know it will work before they try. They need guarantees before they take risks. But life doesn't offer guarantees. Life offers choices. You can choose to speak your truth, even if no one listens. You can choose to stand firm, even if you stand alone. You can choose to act with integrity, even if the world punishes you for it. And when you make those choices, you win regardless of the outcome. Because you maintain something that external circumstances can never touch: your self-respect. Rosa Parks could have been arrested and forgotten. The boycott could have failed. The civil rights movement could have gone nowhere. And yet, her choice to remain seated would still have been right. Because it aligned with her values. Because it honored her dignity. Because it was true. Stop waiting for permission from the outcome. Stop needing the world to validate your choices before you make them. Do what's right, and let the chips fall where they may. Your job is not to control the result. Your job is to be someone who can live with themselves regardless of what happens next. Lesson 7. The enemy is not anger. The enemy is bitterness. Rosa Parks had every reason to be angry. She lived in a country that treated her as subhuman. She faced daily humiliations that would break most people. She had documented horrors that would justify a lifetime of rage. But she channeled that anger into action, not bitterness. This is crucial. Anger is energy. Anger tells you something is wrong and needs to change. Anger is the fuel that drives you to act, to resist, to build something better. Bitterness is different. Bitterness is anger that is curdled. It's anger that has given up on change and settled into resentment. Bitterness doesn't drive you forward. It anchors you to the past. It poisons every good thing in your life. You will be wrong. People will betray you. Life will be unfair. These are not possibilities, they are certainties. The question is not whether you will be angry. The question is what you will do with that anger. Will you let it sharpen you, or will you let it consume you? Will you use it to build or to destroy? Will you let it motivate action, or will you let it ferment into bitterness that poisons your soul? Rosa Parks took her anger at injustice and turned it into 50 years of activism. She channeled it into education, into organizing, into building the world she wanted to see. She didn't let the people who oppressed her win by becoming bitter. She didn't give them that power. When someone wrongs you, bitterness is giving them free rent in your mind. Bitterness is letting them continue to hurt you long after they've moved on. Bitterness is you finishing the job they started. Feel your anger. Acknowledge it. Respect it. Then decide what you're going to build with it. Lesson 8. Strength is not the absence of fatigue. It's the refusal to quit. After that day on the bus, Rosa Parks didn't rest. She didn't become a celebrity and retire. She faced death threats. She lost her job. Her husband lost his job. They received threatening phone calls day and night. They eventually had to leave Alabama entirely because it wasn't safe. And she kept going. For decades after Montgomery, she continued to work for civil rights. She worked with youth. She spoke at events. She showed up, even when she was tired. Especially when she was tired. This is what real strength looks like. It's not the explosion of energy on day one. It's the steady, unglamorous showing up on day 1000. Most people quit not because they face one big obstacle, but because they get tired of facing small ones every single day. They have the courage for the dramatic moment. They don't have the endurance for the long, boring middle. But the long, boring middle is where everything is won or lost. It's the months at the gym when you're not seeing results. It's the years building a business when no one knows your name. It's the daily choice to show up in a relationship even when you're tired of trying. Strength is not about intensity. Strength is about consistency. It's about showing up on the days when you have nothing left. It's about doing the work when it's no longer exciting. Rosa Parks understood that one dramatic act of resistance wasn't enough. The real work was the 50 years that came after. The real work was staying committed to her values when the cameras were off and the world had moved on to the next story. Your life will demand the same from you. You will get tired. You will want to quit. You will look at how far you still have to go and feel overwhelmed. And your job is to show up anyway. Not because you feel like it, not because it's easy, but because you made a commitment to yourself that means more than your temporary discomfort. Pause. Reflect on this. Lesson 9. You don't need everyone's approval. You need your own. When Rosa Parks made her choice, she didn't have unanimous support. Some people in the black community thought she was being reckless. Some thought the boycott was too risky. Some wanted to work within the system more gradually. She didn't need their approval. She had her own. This is the trap that destroys most people's potential. They need consensus before they act. They need everyone to understand before they move forward. They need the world to validate their choices before they make them. But if you wait for everyone to agree with you, you will never do anything worth doing. The people who change the world are always criticized. By people who are scared. By people who benefit from the status quo. By people who simply can't see what you see. And if you need their approval, you will abandon your truth to get it. The only approval you truly need is your own. The only person you have to justify your choices to is the one you see in the mirror. This doesn't mean being arrogant. It doesn't mean refusing to listen to feedback. It means having an internal compass that's stronger than external pressure. When you go against the grain in your life, people will question you. When you set boundaries, people will be upset. When you pursue something unconventional, people will tell you you're wrong. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to be so clear about your values that their doubt doesn't shake you. Rosa Parks didn't need the world to understand why she stayed seated. She understood, and that was enough. Build your life on that foundation. Make choices you can defend to yourself. Live in a way that allows you to sleep at night. Create a standard you can be proud of, even if no one else notices. Because at the end of your life, you won't answer to the critics. You won't answer to the crowd. You will answer to yourself. Lesson 10. Legacy is not what you say. It's what you make inevitable. Rosa Parks rarely spoke about her own heroism. She didn't give dramatic speeches about her courage. She simply lived in a way that made certain changes inevitable. When she refused to move, she didn't just take a stand for herself. She created a situation that forced everyone else to take a stand too. The black community had to decide, will we support her or abandon her? The white establishment had to decide, will we escalate or will we negotiate? Every person in Montgomery had to choose a side. Her quiet act made silence impossible. And in doing so, she changed history. This is how you build a legacy. Not by talking about who you want to be, but by living in a way that forces reality to shift around you. When you commit fully to your values, you change the equation for everyone around you. When you refuse to compromise your standards, you force others to rise or reveal themselves. When you live with absolute integrity, you become a mirror that shows people who they really are. Your legacy is not the words you speak. It's the changes you make inevitable by how you live. If you want to be remembered, don't chase fame. Don't seek recognition. Simply become someone whose absence would leave a hole that can't be filled. Be the person who always shows up. Be the one who keeps their word. Be the one who stands firm when everyone else is compromising. Be the one who does the right thing even when it costs you. Do this long enough, and you don't have to tell people who you are. Your actions will speak so loudly that words become unnecessary. Rosa Parks didn't tell the world she was tired of giving in. She simply stopped giving in. And that single choice rippled through history in ways she could never have predicted. What are you making inevitable with how you live? Lesson 11. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of resolution. The Montgomery bus boycott didn't happen because Rosa Parks wanted peace. It happened because she wanted justice. And sometimes, the path to real peace runs directly through necessary conflict. This is what weak people never understand. They confuse peace with comfort. They avoid conflict at all costs, thinking that's wisdom. They tolerate injustice because confrontation feels hard. But that's not peace. That's surrender dressed up as maturity. Real peace comes from resolving what needs to be resolved. Real peace comes from confronting what needs to be confronted. Real peace is what exists on the other side of necessary conflict, not in the avoidance of it. In your relationships, avoiding difficult conversations doesn't create peace. It creates resentment. Pretending everything is fine when it's not doesn't create harmony. It creates distance. Real peace comes from having the courage to say, "This isn't working, and we need to address it." Real peace comes from being willing to risk temporary discomfort for long-term resolution. Rosa Parks could have kept the peace on that bus. She could have stood up, gone to the back, avoided the conflict, and the injustice would have continued. The oppression would have remained. The system would have stayed broken. Instead, she chose disruption over false peace. She chose confrontation over comfort. And because of that choice, real change became possible. Stop running from necessary conflict. Stop avoiding difficult conversations. Stop pretending everything is fine when it's not. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable dysfunction. Sometimes the most peaceful thing you can do is disrupt a harmful pattern. Be willing to be uncomfortable. Be willing to be misunderstood. Be willing to risk temporary conflict for lasting resolution. That's where real peace lies. Lesson 12. You are not responsible for the world you inherited. You are responsible for the world you leave behind. Rosa Parks was born into a world she didn't create. She inherited segregation, injustice, and systematic oppression. None of that was her fault. None of that was her choice. But she refused to use that as an excuse. She could have said, "This is just how things are. I didn't create this system. Why should I be the one to fight it?" And she would have been justified in that thinking. But she understood something crucial. You are not responsible for your starting point. You are responsible for your direction. The world you were born into is not your fault. The family you came from is not your fault. The trauma you experienced is not your fault. The disadvantages you face are not your fault. But what you do with all of that, that's entirely your responsibility. You can spend your life resenting your circumstances, or you can spend your life transforming them. You can be a victim of your past, or you can be the architect of your future. You can accept the world as it is, or you can bend it toward what it should be. Rosa Parks chose to bend it. She didn't have power. She didn't have wealth. She didn't have privilege. What she had was the refusal to accept that things had to stay as they were. And that refusal changed everything. You have that same power. Right now, in your life, there are things that are broken. There are patterns that need to change. There are injustices that need to be addressed. You didn't create them, but you can end them. You didn't choose your past, but you are choosing your future with every decision you make today. The question is not, is it fair that you have to be the one to change things? The question is, are you willing to be the one who does? Because someone has to, and it might as well be you. Rosa Parks died on October 24, 2005, at the age of 92. She lived long enough to see the world she helped create. She lived long enough to see the Civil Rights Act passed. She lived long enough to see a black president elected. But more importantly, she lived in a way that proved something essential. One person, armed with nothing but conviction and the refusal to compromise their dignity, can change the world. She wasn't superhuman. She was simply unwilling to participate in her own diminishment. She was tired of giving in. So she stopped. And that changes everything. You are facing your own bus right now. Maybe it's a relationship that demands you compromise yourself. Maybe it's a job that requires you to betray your values. Maybe it's a pattern you've accepted for too long. Maybe it's a voice in your head that tells you to stay small, stay quiet, stay in your place. Your moment is coming. Or maybe it's already here. And when it arrives, you will have a choice. You can stand up and give away your seat. You can compromise your dignity for temporary peace. You can tell yourself that one moment doesn't matter, that your voice doesn't count, that someone else will take the stand. Or you can stay seated. You can look that challenge in the eye and say, with the quiet certainty of someone who has built their foundation in private, "No, not today. Not ever again." You can be the person who refuses to move on what matters. Rosa Parks didn't change the world because she was special. She changed the world because she decided that her dignity was not negotiable. And then she built a life on that decision. Every single day. In public and in private. When it was easy and when it was hard. When people were watching and when no one cared. She simply refused to move. And eventually, the whole world shifted around her. That same power lives in you. It's not dramatic. It's not flashy. It's simply the quiet, unshakable commitment to live according to what you know is true. Build that foundation. Stand on it. And refuse to move. The world will have no choice but to shift around you. Thank you for watching.